Lessons in Chemistry, a novel by Bonnie Garmus, summarized by Butterbook. Elizabeth Zott, the star of the hit television program Supper at 6, is not concerned with her rise to fame as a television personality following a poor chemistry academic career. Instead, it tells the story of how she fell into television after giving up on her real interest, science, and how she eventually found her purpose again. This story to Bonnie Garmus's Lessons in Chemistry emphasizes the patriarchal structures that slowed Elizabeth's professional advancement and the unique strategy she took to challenge gender stereotypes and finally overcome them. Elizabeth Zott, often known as Luscious Lizzie, is a charming TV chef who transforms 1950s America's cooking and dietary habits. She was an American scientist who was undervalued and underpaid before she became a television celebrity. She is offered an uninteresting position working on little lab projects at her employer, the Hastings Research Institute in California, where she is paid significantly less than her male coworkers. Calvin Evans, Elizabeth's supervisor, at first had always mistaken her for a secretary before he recognized how gifted and driven an individual she was. Calvin and Elizabeth had different professional goals. At first, Elizabeth intended to earn a PhD in Abiogenesis, but her reputation swiftly vanished after she was sexually attacked by her lecherous superior, Dr. Mayer. Her boss at Hastings, Dr. Donati, initially appears set on preventing her from conducting any research on her own, but after receiving a generous donation, he finally gives her Abiogenesis project approval. Donati discreetly uses the majority of the funds for other projects while keeping the donor thinking that Zott is a man, not a female scientist. The attraction between the two was quite obvious. However, Calvin and Elizabeth decide to collaborate in a strictly professional capacity, believing that as their attraction grows, the other won't be as strict about professionalism. After some time, Elizabeth and Calvin start dating. Elizabeth is afraid that Calvin's academic achievements will eclipse hers. Thus, she doesn't want to be married, making their relationship setup unusual for the era. Instead of paying rent to Calvin, who owns their shared house, Elizabeth chooses to cook for him 5 nights a week. They carry on in this manner, surprising others and joyfully glad they have found each other. One evening, while walking their dog named 630, Calvin gets hit by a police car and dies. Because Elizabeth Zott finds it difficult to defend her academic status, her experience serves as a powerful example of the male-dominated nature of STEM fields. It is common for her coworkers to confuse her for a secretary or assistant, as workplace sexism is tolerated. Though she and Calvin are intellectually compatible, she is hindered by the 1950s cultural norms. Women are expected to be less serious scientists who are interested in getting married, having children, and taking care of the home. Zott has to overcome several obstacles in order to succeed professionally, including the perception that women aren't serious scientists and should instead concentrate on marriage, raising children, and taking care of their families. Elizabeth returns to Hastings after Calvin's death and finds a box containing his personal belongings. She finds what she believes is the proof that Calvin was planning on proposing to her, a small blue box containing a diamond ring. This development brings sadness and nausea to Elizabeth as she realizes that Calvin meant to marry her. However, that wasn't the main reason for her nausea. She discovers soon enough that she is pregnant with Calvin's child, which presents a problem to Hastings as the mysterious donor wants to meet the Mr. Zott, who is exceptionally a brilliant scientist. Unfortunately, there is no Mr. Zott, only a Miss Zott who is unwed and, as management has just found out, pregnant. After being fired, Elizabeth begins to bill her previous coworkers for advice on their research projects. She goes into labor 9 months after Calvin's passing. She is happy, but also overwhelmed by her new role as a mother. Elizabeth gets to know her neighbor, Harriet Sloan, who supports her as she faces the difficulties of being a woman and a mother in the 1950s. Baby Madeline constantly cries, overwhelming her mother, but eventually, Madeline grows into a clever but introverted child. Elizabeth returned to Hastings for work when Madeline was 5 years old. She is hired by Donati, who is hesitant to offer her a position. Elizabeth works as a lab tech without Calvin, usually assisting men despite her background in education. Miss Frask, who has followed traditional gender roles, proves to be an unexpected ally. Miss Frask has discovered that being a model woman hasn't protected her from misogyny, and despite her best attempts to find a husband, she remains single. Elizabeth learns from Miss Frask that she studied science, pursued a doctorate, and never intended to become a secretary. In a comparable manner, Miss Frask lost faith in academia after being sexually assaulted by a male colleague in her department. Miss Frask, Elizabeth Zott, and Harriet Sloane are three ladies who represent different versions of femininity. Harriet is the standard housewife. Elizabeth is an unorthodox mother seeking a profession in a male-dominated area, and Miss Frask is a spinster playing roles from the 1950s. They don't seem to share much at first, with Miss Frask even going against Elizabeth. Nevertheless, regardless of their roles, they all encounter misogyny and dissatisfaction as the book goes on. They all want more out of life, even if they fit into traditional gender stereotypes. America might not have known about Luscious Lizzie if it weren't for 6-year-old Amanda Pine and her habit of snatching lunch. When Elizabeth learns that Amanda, Madeline's classmate, has been stealing the best parts of Madeline's delicious packed lunches, she becomes furious. She approaches Walter, Amanda's father, and assures him that this will not occur again. The same day, an important paper about abiogenesis that was taken directly from Elizabeth's study files by Dr. Donati was published. This caused Elizabeth to resign from her job at Hastings. Walter Pine, Amanda's father, is a producer at a nearby TV station, and he asked Elizabeth to work as host of a brand new cooking program called Supper at 6 for a 6-month period. Elizabeth takes the position, but faces challenges as she wants to cook in a lab coat in a kitchen decorated with test tubes. She speaks directly to the harried housewives the show targets, emphasizing the importance of cooking and their time. As a result of an assignment to create a family tree, Madeline began to wonder about her father's past, including his adoption as a newborn. Madeline met Reverend Wakely, who knew her father. Despite studying chemistry together and keeping in touch, Calvin and Wakely's religious views were a constant source of disagreement. Though it was annoying, Elizabeth's main worry wasn't the large salary difference she found between herself and the male TV channel presenters. She gets summoned in to meet with executive producer Phil Lebensmal when she refuses to participate in a product placement for tinned soup. He informs Elizabeth that she and everyone who's working on the show is fired. As the conversation becomes heated, Phil gets a heart attack. Elizabeth and Walter find themselves in possession of a legitimate hit when they find letters from television networks desperate to syndicate Supper at 6. They can take full advantage of it without Phil getting in the way. Elizabeth is an authentic, stubborn lady who struggles with the television studio because she doesn't want to play the stereotypically feminine homemaker. Nevertheless, by avoiding saccharine scripts and frilly aprons, her act succeeds in connecting with her audience. Elizabeth addresses the difficulties of being a homemaker head-on. She affirms the value of the work, which is a positive change in a culture that values the effortlessly perfect housewife. In the story, while looking into Madeline's family history, Reverend Wakely comes across documents from the orphanage where Calvin was raised following the passing of his adoptive parents. According to the documents, Calvin's original family had been looking for him. However, after discovering that Calvin had passed away through the corrupt minister managing the orphanage who lied to them, Calvin's family established a trust in his name to support scientific research. When Madeline first meets Miss Frask, Wakely's typist, she hears of Elizabeth's terrible time at Hastings, including her pregnancy-related resignation. Madeline approaches her mother, who now believes that Elizabeth should return to working as a real scientist instead of a TV cook. After many years of success, Elizabeth reveals her decision to leave the show and urges her female fans to make life changes. Months passed, and job offers didn't come through, until she receives an invitation to a meeting at Hastings, where she meets Calvin's birth mother, Avery Parker. Dr. Donati is fired by Avery, who then offers Elizabeth the position of head of chemistry. Avery was thrilled to meet her granddaughter, Madeline, and is glad to have her in the family. Elizabeth opens a new notebook at the end of the story, enabling her to carry on with her Abiogenesis project. According to the theory of abiogenesis, life on Earth originated from a drastic transformation in which non-living forms gave life to living ones. The TV personality. Elizabeth Zott has revealed her own goals and sense of self as she has become stuck in the rut of fame. Her life drastically changes when she goes back to science because Avery sees her brilliance and gives her the role that she deserves. The makeup of her and Madeline's family changes as a result. Significant transformations are also experienced by other people, like Miss Frask, who gets promoted to head of personnel at Hastings, and Harriet Sloane, who leaves her violent husband to date Walter Pine, a television producer. Elizabeth Zott believed that change was a good and important thing in life. Chemist Elizabeth Zott battles both her love for her colleague Calvin and patriarchal society. Tragically, Elizabeth takes over as host of a national cookery show after Calvin passes away and quits academics. The show urges American women to consider their needs and ambitions seriously. At the height of her popularity, Elizabeth returns to academia to continue working as a chemist, fulfilling her own dreams and overcoming her career obstacles.
Enjoying our book summaries on Butterbook? Please support us by subscribing to our channel. Your engagement helps us bring more great content for book enthusiasts. Check the description box below for exclusive discounts. Also, we'd love to hear your thoughts and the titles you're interested in. Happy reading!